Welcome back, guys. So in this video I'm going to be showing you how to build this X-frame farmhouse concealment table. I'll also show you how to install the biometric lock as well as the Rfid lock. You do not need them both obviously, but you'll know how to install either one. If you follow my channel, you know I talk about taking things that are hot right now, which is Farmhouse, and adding a twist to it. So this is a perfect example. And if you do not want to conceal something in this table, you'll learn how to make just a nice coffee table. Do me a favor and smash that subscribe button, and let's get started. This build will mainly consist of 2x4s and 2x6 material. And as always, I'll throw the cut list in the description. I also have plans for this on my Etsy shop. I'll link that as well. So we're going to start out just by cutting parts. And if you're using 2x4 or 2x6 material, which I am here, a lot of times it comes with a rounded over edge. So all I'm doing in this step is taking that rounded over edge off. I want this to have a square look. I do not want it to look like it was built out of just a 2x4 or a 2x6. The material that I'm cutting right now is the 2x6 material that I will be ripping down to 5 1/8. This will be my tabletop. And this is going to be my 2x4 material that I'm ripping down to 3 inches wide. This plan also calls for 1.5 by 1.5 inch material, so basically just square stock. So we'll go ahead and rip that down as well. Now this is just preparing the wood for the precision cut, so for the cut list, again in the description. Now it's time to actually make our parts. So to keep me from throwing all kinds of numbers at you during this video, I will refer to these parts as I have referred to them in the cut list. That way I do not accidentally tell you the wrong dimensions, and this video will be a lot easier to follow. Okay, so to start, let's assemble our front and back. For this assembly, we'll need 2 of the legs, a top rail, and a bottom rail. Once you have your parts roughed into place, let's go ahead and put some pocket holes in this. You can use any type of joinery that you would like, but for this type of project, I chose pocket holes. So with our pocket holes in place, let's go ahead and glue and screw. For the front and back of this project, I will be using 2.5 inch pocket hole screws. So for the bottom rail on this, it needs to be spaced up 2.25 inch from the bottom of the leg. And if you'd like the more finished look, you can put these pocket hole plugs in now. Now with everything perfect for the front and the back, this is the part of the build where I realized I used the wrong material for my legs. Yeah. So after editing out a few choice words, I decided to take my own advice and use my own cut list. And this is what they're supposed to look like. Front and back are now complete. We're just going to clean them up a little bit with some sanding, yay, and get them ready to be combined with the end rails. Here I'm just going to be laying out my end rails to get them just kind of roughed in so I know where to put my pocket holes. So after I drill my pocket holes, before combining this, I'm actually going to go to the next step, which is going to be painting. It is a lot easier to paint these parts separate. And I know you're asking, why is he using spray paint? Okay, so this is my base coat. Again, this is a distressed farmhouse table. So what I like to do, take black spray paint, good quality, put it on all of the edges, the high points, the parts that will show through as you distress. And I'm going to do this for all of my parts. This does not have to be perfect. You're seeing I'm just hit and miss. This is just to highlight the areas that I'm going to be sanding. So once that dries, we're going to go ahead and put our top coat on. And you don't even have to paint it all. This is just what I chose to do. If you'd like to, you can stain it. And what is a farmhouse table without a distressed top? So after doing some experimenting with different distressing techniques and some different stains, I chose this. So while our paint is drying, let's go ahead and distress our top. These parts will be labeled top end and top boards. So essentially our tabletop. So what you're seeing me do is some of my distressing techniques. I actually have a video on that, but I'm basically taking a wire wheel with an angle grinder and kind of digging out all of this softwood. This is going to give this wood texture. I'm also taking an old square nail, making some marks in this material, a hatchet to make it look like some hue marks. And this is what it looks like. Now it's time to put our tabletop together. So these are going to be our top boards. There will be 6 of those. We'll put our end boards on here in a minute. I will be putting this together with pocket hole screws and glue. I'm just marking out all of my spacing for my screws. So with the tabletop put together, let's go ahead and put on our end boards. Some people call these breadboards. So what I'm doing to make sure these end boards tie everything in perfectly, nice and tight, I'm putting 2 screws in each board. And back to sanding. Basically, we're just knocking off some of the fuzz that may have came up with the angle grinder, also some of the high points from the hatchet. This is only like a 320 grit sandpaper, but it's ready for stain. And I chose to use a stain called Early American by Minwax. But I recommend playing around with different stains. Get that look that you really want and that you're going for. And then once this dries, you can actually blend this a bit with sanding. Again, even a higher grit. This is 600 grit sandpaper. I want my breadboards or my end boards to be a little darker than the center. And to go ahead and finish this off and get it out of the way, let it be drying while we're finishing the rest of the project, let's go ahead and put our finish on. This is just a Minwax water-based urethane. So now that this paint has dried, we need to distress it. And this is my distressing techniques for the rest of the parts that we have cut and painted. So this is where the black spray paint comes in handy. You know, we hit the edges. I'm just lightly sanding. Again, this is like a 600 grit sandpaper. We're bringing out that black from the underneath, but not getting rid of too much of the white on top. Now let's go ahead and put this thing together using our end boards. Now I'm going to install what I'm calling the bottom cleat. This will actually hold the bottom shelf in place when we get to that step. So to install these bottom cleats, these are 1 inch by 3/4. I'm actually going to be drilling holes through the long side. So I'm going to be drilling 1 inch holes down the edge. And with a little bit of glue and some 1.5 inch screws, I will attach this to the frame. The spacing for this is going to be 3/4 of an inch from the top of this board, because the shelving material that I'm going to be using is 3/4 of an inch thick. Now let's install our slide supports. The slides that I have linked are 1/2 inch thick, so I'm actually bringing this slide support down 1/2 inch. Once in place and it's flush with the top, we'll go ahead and attach it to the top side rail. So in order for this slide to come out and this tabletop to work correctly, there has to be a notch for the slide to actually come out of. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just measuring out my slide and preparing to cut my notch. The easiest way for me was just use an oscillating tool. These things are awesome. But you can use a handsaw, chisel, whatever that you would like. Now let's go ahead and put the bottom of our cabinet on. Now hold up. If you're going to put on any type of a lock, an RFID, biometric, however, you may want to skip this step until the very end. It is a lot easier to install these locks, and I learned the hard way with this bottom board off. But by installing this bottom board using pocket hole screws from the underneath, this will allow me to take this off if I ever need to get into it. If my batteries ever go bad, if I ever get locked out of this thing, I can just take out all of these different screws and have access to my secret panel. So this is what it should look like at this point. So let's go ahead and move on to our X braces, or I call them cross piece in the description. But the easiest way that I found to line these up after you have your 60-degree angles on both ends is to just overlap them. Overlap them, take a pencil, make your marks, and now you know where you need to make your cuts. We will be half lapping this material, and there's several ways to do it. I've done this with a skill saw even, but if your saw has a depth stop, set that depth stop for 3/4 of an inch. Remember, this material is 1.5 inches thick, so 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, 1.5 inches. So whenever you make your cuts and you mate them up, they'll mate up flush. Quick tip, if you are planning on putting in the bottom of this cabinet last, leave one of these X frames out until the end. So let's go ahead and get these installed. A little bit of glue, a couple screws, perfect. Now when we screw these in, I'm going to be using 2.5-inch screws, okay? I'm going to be using 2.5-inch screws from the bottom and 2.5-inch screws from the underneath of the tops. Now let's get these slides installed. Now the important thing when installing these slides is make sure that they stick up just about 1/16 of an inch, maybe even 1/8 above your side rails. This is going to ensure that the tabletop doesn't slide against that, creating friction, creating more noise. And that's all I'm doing here is installing the screws into the base of the slide. Since these slides are not being installed traditionally, I'm going to be using an untraditional method to actually mark and install these. So put your tabletop on, get everything squared up, get everything even. Then from the underneath, use a pencil to mark where the edge meets the top. Then pull that top out, line your top slide up with that mark you just made. Go ahead and put a couple extra screws in. Now whenever you take this off and go to put it back on after you've installed the rest of your screws, everything is lined up perfectly. This is just a little tip. Now for your bottom shelf, you can use about anything that you want. I had some 3/4 inch pine laying around. This is reclaimed longleaf pine, but I'm going to cut this down to 5 1/8 inch wide. So with my pieces cut, I'm going to take them back to the project and basically just dry fit these in. I need to make sure that my measurement was correct and that everything's going to line up nice and tight. Well, see, like this. So now I need to take just a hair off of this board for everything to fit perfectly. Now I've taken one of my bottom boards, measured 1 inch in from each side, and I'm just transferring that mark onto my bottom cleats. Pre-drilling the holes, and this is what I'll use to attach the boards from the bottom. So this is easiest done by turning the table on its side. I'm using 1 1/4 inch screws to fasten all of my bottom boards. That way everything's hidden on the bottom. And she's pretty much done. So now this is the point where we will test everything out and make any needed adjustments. So I'm going to show you how to install the Biometric fingerprint lock. This thing is pretty cool and it's only about 38 bucks. I'll throw the link in the description. Now, like I mentioned before, you have to be careful buying this stuff online. A lot of it's just cheap junk. But this company, the one that I'm linking, I know them. I know that they sell quality products and their customer service is impeccable. So now after I have the placement that I want, I just hold the button up to the workpiece, or you can use the template, and I'm tracing it out. Came out to 1 1/8 inch bit. I'm going to drill this all the way through this sideboard. And now we'll just dry fit this into place. Just make sure that everything matches up good. and it does. But from the back, I need to attach a bracket. So since I'm using thicker material, I need to actually drill in a place for this bracket to connect. So mark the thickness that I need, and then I take some of my favorite stuff, blue tape, and I actually mark that on my bit. This will tell me when to stop and prevent me from drilling in too deep. Now we'll get everything into place, attach our little bracket, as seen here, and it's secured nice and tight. So with the scanner in place, let's install the locking mechanism. So for this build, the locking mechanism actually sits up just a bit too far, but I have a super easy fix for that. I'm just going to trace around the locking mechanism, and then I'll actually just cut it out with my handy dandy oscillating tool or whatever else that you have. So with the bottom off and the table upside down, I'm just lining my latch and my locking mechanism up. Then install the latch to the tabletop and the locking mechanism to your side rail. Now let's give it a test. Perfect. And this thing will hold up to like 20 different fingerprints. And also give you a low battery alarm for whenever it's getting time to change the battery. And now for the RFID locks. Let me show you how to install these. Again, like the others, you have to be careful about the quality. A lot of these things say that they can read through an 1.5 inch material, but they cannot. And if you try to get a hold of customer service, they ghost out. Not the case for the one that I'm going to link. Plus, these things are only like 20 bucks. So for the added coolness of this build, definitely worth it. So with the bottom off, table upside down, I found it easier to actually put the latch into the lock and install it that way. That way that I know that my spacing is correct. And for the RFID, you need to make sure that you put the lock actually on the tabletop and the latch on the sideboard. And there we have it. This is the finished product. Looks beautiful. No one would ever know this is actually a concealment table. And if you don't want to make it a concealment table, again, it'll make a nice sofa table. Okay, so let me show you how these different locks work. I actually put the RFID card on the bottom of that coaster. So let's talk about some other add-ons that you can put in just to increase the wow factor. There's a couple different things. These little LED lights are awesome. They're motion activated, so whenever this top slides back, they kick on. You can install them anywhere. They have 3M tape on the back. They're only like 10 bucks. I'll throw them in the description. I actually like them placed in the back, but that's up to you. I've linked these mountable magnets in the description as well. These things are only about 10 bucks a piece, and they're actually designed for firearms. So they actually have a protective coating on them to keep it from scratching. Let's say you choose not to use the foam, but you don't want your firearms rattling around if it gets bumped. These are the perfect substitute. You can also use these for other mounting options. They hold a ton of weight, so you don't have to worry about anything falling, dropping if anything gets bumped. And there you have it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this video really helps you guys. There's actually a lot of money to be made in these, and now you have all the tools that you need. So until next time, go out, make some money, and we'll see ya.